When Joseph and Mary were summoned to travel to Bethlehem to be counted for the census 2000 odd years ago, they had to travel well over 100 kilometers. 4 to 5 days approximately they had to travel in order to be counted. So we in Australia should be feeling blessed, so to speak, that our friends at the ABS make it possible for us to fill out the census conveniently from our homes, and it'll take you half an hour if you have a family, approximately. So that's quite easy. That, of course, said, if all of Australia, half of Australia at least, is under lockdown on census night on Tuesday, well, maybe a 4 5 day hiking journey would actually be the preferable option. That said, the Australian census is definitely well worth the effort. We work in so many different aspects with census data as businesses, as governments, in order to make sure that we can fairly distribute limited resources across Australia. Transport planning, infrastructure planning, all relies heavily on Australian census data. And just to put into perspective how good the Australian census is, remember that we ask approximately 60 questions every 5 years of our entire population, whereas the Americans, they only run their census every 10 years and they only ask 9 questions. The way that we can cross-tabulate data based on 60 questions every 5 years is fantastic. I'm, of course, coming from this from a very selfish perspective, since I write these columns every week. And once census data is out as of June next year, my columns will write themselves for quite a long time, simply because there is endless data that we can draw from to get into really interesting insights, particularly this time around, because we will have several cities under lockdown and under different lockdown conditions. So we can see quite a bit from this census how lockdowns impact at the very least the working from home arrangements, how much people actually spend working in the home in terms of just housework. This is asked as well. So this will be very nice to see those aspects of the data. We'll be getting data about chronic health conditions for the first time. So we can actually see where there is a need, a specific need for certain services in areas, but we can also probably see where certain conditions might be underreported. If we, for example, suspect, and that's just a hypothesis, that depression and anxiety should be somewhat evenly distributed across the population, and we then see corners in the data where there is no depression reported at all, maybe it is time to focus public awareness campaigns there in order to make sure that people there actually know that this is something they could talk to a doctor or a specialist about. And of course, we also add questions about veteran status. That's an interesting element of the data that we haven't looked at so far at all. So that'll be fun to be playing with. One of the questions that was discussed whether it should be added to the census and it was not included is the sexual preference questions. Are you gay? Are you straight? Are you whatever? Why is something like this not included in the census? Lots of young people argued that this might be an important thing because it is an important part of their identity. That said, it might just be, and that's a counterintuitive argument, it might just be very much in favor of the LGBTQI community that this is not specifically asked in the census. Because the temptation would be very, very high to constantly single out a specific group in questions where sexuality doesn't matter. And I think that's an interesting argument to think about. Well, the census is not about identity. The census is about solving specific questions. What question could be solved if we specifically knew sexual identities of people across the country? It's a difficult question, iffy question, and maybe it was the easy way to not include this question, but overall, I think we actually might save ourselves from quite some grief and this constant singling out a specific group where a policy, an economic policy or some sort of social policy is not actually helping because it has nothing to do with gender or with sexuality. So that's an iffy question to discuss. You can stand on either way, I guess, on this question, but again, not included this time. And of course, this census finally scrapped the question about internet access to your home, simply because whether you have an internet connection at home doesn't matter, since essentially everyone has a cell phone. So, in summary, I'm very much looking forward to the Australian census that's run on Tuesday, 10th of August, and my column spills out a bit of the things that we can do with the data in the future.